Reading 84 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 1. Birdlip, August 30th, 1943. The Opposites. Part 2. We can picture a tightrope expert who keeps his balance by swinging now to the right, now to the left. Of course, he already knows how to do this by long training and study of himself. Without knowledge, he could not do it. Suppose we ask him Pilate's question, "What is truth?" and say, "Is it to the right or to the left?" If he said it was both, our sense of truth would be offended, because we all imagine that truth must be rigid and inflexible. It is said that, once upon a time, a man dreamed he had discovered the secret of the universe and woke up and wrote down his dream. Next morning, he found he had written down, "Walk on both legs." In the sphere of our own psychology, the place we live in with our consciousness, having no real self-knowledge, we walk on one leg, regarding truth as something invariable. We think we know what is right and wrong, or good and bad, and because of this, we have no idea what it is to keep a balance in ourselves. We do not see the opposites in ourselves, save in the sense of all that being bad and this being good. I once heard it said in this work that the devil is also necessary. At the same time, we are constantly swung about by the events of life, which is always changing its aspect. And as we are swung, we do not try to assimilate the opposites. We ignore everything that does not correspond to our viewpoints. What does not correspond to our viewpoints is for us the devil. So we walk on one leg. Yet we can understand that it would be a mistake for a tightrope walker to regard the left as the devil and the right only as desirable. For we would say that at different times he has to lean to the right or lean to the left, and that only in this way can he advance. This is the idea expressed in the passage from Ecclesiastes quoted above, that there is a time to keep and a time to cast away. At one time a man should speak, and at another he should keep silence. What does this mean? It means that if people are looking for a rigid code of truth, if they regard truth as a rigid series of fixed rules, they will never find her. Nothing is the same in time. Time is change. Everything changes in time, and everything in time changes between the opposites. It is now one way and now the opposite way. Everything in time is governed by the opposites and swings between them. This is the significance of the passage quoted from Ecclesiastes. Things that will go well at one moment will not go well at the next moment. There is a time for everything under the sun, and everything is excellent in its time. However, people expect things always to be the same, and when things do not correspond to what they wish, they are incapable of adjusting themselves and taking in impressions from that side of life that does not correspond to their viewpoints. I suppose that there is nothing more difficult for us to learn than that time is not the same. We want the same and expect the same, although we complain about it. Our inability to assimilate the opposite, to see things from an adverse point of view, to be conscious on both sides of the pendulum, renders us liable to monotony. And this is deeply based on our general attitude to life that does not include the idea of the opposites. We insist on taking life in a one-sided way and regard everything that is contrary to our viewpoints as exceptional or unfortunate. The result is lack of flexibility. We lean to the right and refuse to lean to the left when occasion demands it. A living thing is in a state of balance. It is balanced between life and death. As long as it makes a distinction between itself and what it lives in, it remains alive. Now, you cannot be alive if you take up a fixed view of life. The interaction between life and yourself then ceases. You become identified with your view of life. Now, the work teaches that you should never become identified with life, whichever way it is swinging, whether into war or peace, comfort or hardship, and so on. But we all want to be fixed. It is as if we wanted to freeze things into a fixed pattern. Then we become identified through our attitudes. The surface of life and the surface of ourselves cease to have their normal interchange. We then become life, and there is no longer any living in life. Every living organism is alive because it resists life and learns how to use it. And from this angle, life is the opposite to life. Every living thing is born into life wound up like a spring under high tension. It is more than its surroundings. It has a certain energy that makes it more clever than the life in which it finds itself. It has a surface that meets the surface of life, and between these two surfaces, that living thing lives. It lives by opposites, in the sense that life is an antagonist to it. As long as it can deal with life, it is alive. But in the case of man, who is far more complex than any other living creature, we must understand that he has a psychological surface apart from a physical one. His environment is not only a physical one, but a psychological one. Have you ever asked yourselves, what is your psychological environment? Have you a sense of surface towards it? Do you keep this side of yourselves alive with good interchange? Or are you nothing but your psychological environment, going with everyone's opinion, with everything you hear, with everything you read? In that case, you are really dead, because there is no distinction between yourself and life. Unless you feel that you are living in life, you are dead. There is no tension between the two surfaces of life and yourself. Some of you may have heard of the scientific idea of entropy. The idea is like this. Everything tends to become, let us say, at the same temperature. If you put a boiling kettle in the room, it will warm up the surroundings until everything is at the same temperature. Now, once life and death become, as it were, at the same temperature, you are dead. You can only work if you have a higher temperature than life. And man has in him ways of keeping himself at a higher temperature than life. The sense of the surface, whether intellectual, emotional, or physical, that separates you from the surface of external life is necessary. It is really another aspect of self-remembering. All things have an outline or surface that distinguishes them from life. We are all different shapes, animals, insects, plants, and so on, but every one of them has a particular shape that distinguishes it from what it lives in. They meet at their surfaces, the surface of life. Life seeks to devour them, and they seek to devour life. Every living creature having its own life given to it is capable of devouring external life according to its own design. But, I repeat, man is not merely a physical shape, but also a psychological shape. That is, a mental shape and an emotional shape, because out of all creation, man has a psychological destiny, apart from his physical destiny. However, we must come back to the point that is essential in the teaching of the opposites. We must realize that we live on this planet between the opposites. Our whole lives ordinarily are governed by the law of the pendulum. We all swing to and fro. When you are in one opposite, you are unconscious of the other, and vice versa. You may have idle dreams of rising and rising, of progressing and progressing, of getting better and better, but all these are indeed idle dreams. You cannot escape from the opposites unless you know how to do so. You have to see both sides of yourselves and how one side helps the other side. This requires double thinking. One might even say it requires double consciousness. In other words, it requires self-knowledge. What do you think self-knowledge means? It means knowledge of all sides of yourself. What do you think self-consciousness means? It means being conscious of all sides of yourself. First, know thyself. Then, nothing in excess. What does excess mean? It means going too far to the right or to the left. But it means not only this. When you are too far to the right, you are in excess and must go to the left. Nothing is more painful than excessive goodness. For example, take people who are excessively kind. Does it not at once arouse the opposite in yourself, just as people who are excessively cruel? Naturally, all forms of vanity and pride, which form the false personality, enable us to think that we can do only good and that we should be regarded with admiration. But I am afraid that finding one's balance has nothing to do with pride or vanity. What is said in the strange reports of the Sermon on the Mount? Surely something is said about, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." What does this mean? Have you ever thought how much your vanity and pride put you in the opposites? To be poor in spirit means not to identify with oneself. Now, supposing I only identify with what I think is the best side of myself, will I be poor in spirit? Will I then ever be able to walk on two legs? Will I ever be able to assimilate both sides of myself, both opposites in myself and in others, and in life? When people say, "Thank God I am not as other men," do you think they are one-sided? Certainly they have buffers which enable them not to see their contradictions. But if you can see both sides of yourself, what you call your good side and your bad, then you begin to be conscious in opposites at the same time. And this is where some strange secret lies that is spoken of so much in past esoteric literature. There is a Sufi saying, "All true life is the peace and harmony of contraries. Death is due to war between them."